While regular working Americans are seeing higher and higher prices for food, energy, housing, and consumer goods, while of course pay remains the same, President Joe Biden is basically crowing about cutting the deficit.
I reduced the federal deficit. All the talk about the deficit from my Republican friends, I love it. I've reduced it $350 billion in my first year in office. And we're on track to reduce it by the end of September by another $1.5 trillion, the largest drop ever. I don't want to hear Republicans talk about deficits and their ultra MAGA agenda.
I don't want to hear Republicans talk about deficits. Look, here's the thing. This irritates me for so many different reasons. He's trying to reach out to Republicans and say, look, Republicans, I don't want to hear you talk about the deficit. Look at how much I cut the deficit. So you can't talk about that. Oh, really? Oh, okay, yeah. Here's the thing. Republicans don't care. They don't care. They're never going to give you credit. They're never going to say anything nice about you, and they're never going to vote for you. Get it through your head, Joe. It's not going to happen. Stop trying to court Republicans. Okay. Now, I'm going to give you the details, by the way, of why that entire argument, by the way, is bullshit. All right. So now, first, look, how did this happen in the first place? What happened to cut spending? Well, it turns out that a lot of the COVID-19 pandemic programs instituted under the Trump administration have ended. That's why. So you didn't do anything. You just let these programs, which by the way, COVID-19 is still going on. There are still people dying from COVID. There are different strains that are coming out. And yet he's basically bragging, hell, look, we cut the deficit by eliminating spending on COVID. Wow. Congratulations. That's where the reduction is coming from. So now if you get COVID-19, you have to go to the hospital. Guess what? That treatment's on you. You have to pay that out of pocket because the government will no longer cover it. So great. Now you're doing less on COVID than Donald Trump. Congratulations. Well done. Now, not only that, but here you have no domestic policy to fall back on. Thanks to Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, the Senate parliamentarian, the filibuster, whatever you want to blame. There it is. There it is. And so, but hey, don't worry, that saves you money on the deficit. It's about the only thing that Joe Biden has put a lot of funding towards during his administration is just the military, where Congress continues to pass more and more military spending. And look, Biden has been giving Ukraine lots of money for weapons. I actually don't begrudge that. Yes, Ukraine has the legitimate need for weapons to fight against a Russian invasion. Fine. But I am going to point out that it seems like it's so much easier to authorize military spending on weapons systems, whether it be give it to Ukraine or just spend money on weapons systems in general. It's so much easier to do that than to get people health care in this country, than to get people child care or child tax credits. And yet, Biden is taking the fact that now we're spending less because all these things expired and he hasn't been able to pass anything and saying, look, Republicans nailed it. I cut the deficit. What are you going to do? He's proud of not doing anything. I mean, that's insane. Why would you take a victory lap on that? Now, here's the thing. Again, is he proud of doing nothing? Apparently seems to be. Now back to an article that I had read here. This is according to the, I believe, Associated Press. It is unclear if greater fiscal responsibility can deliver politically for Biden as Democrats try to defend their control of the House and the Senate. Well, I can answer that. That's super easy. It won't. It won't. Look, here's what the top priority is for voters in the midterms. It's the economy. All right. And by that, reining in inflation. Inflation is an issue. And we know inflation, of course, is a result of, the disruptions from COVID, you have disruptions in the supply chain, things like that. But you also have the issue of corporate greed. Corporate greed has actually added a lot onto inflation. If you were to rein in the corporations and their excess greed, things wouldn't be as expensive as they are now. They would be more expensive, yes, but not 8% inflation. All right, there's more. I'm going to break it down here. This is according to a poll. It's Pew Research, a very recent poll on what Americans are worried about when it comes to the midterms. 71% of Americans say the economy is a top priority. Healthcare, the cost of healthcare specifically, 61% of Americans say that this is their top priority, that Biden and Congress should do something about. COVID, 60%. Improving education, 58%. Securing Social Security, 57%. You know where you find deficit reduction? You have to go down quite a bit. 45%. 45% of Americans say, yes, Congress, Biden, deficit reduction, that is our top priority. Okay. And by the way, the majority of those people that say that are Republicans, 57%. I'm sorry, not 57, 63%. That's Republicans. 31% of Democrats are saying that this should be Biden's top priority. So no, I don't think this is going to help Joe Biden with the base. And it's not going to get Republicans to flip over and vote for Democrats. It's not going to happen. They think guys, they think Democrats eat babies and drink their blood and work for Satan. You think they're going to vote for Joe Biden because he reduced the deficit just a little bit? No. It doesn't matter how much he cuts the deficit. He could cut the deficit to nothing. He could eliminate the national debt. But there's no feasible way for him to actually do that today. But he could. He could get it done. And then Republicans would still find some way to complain about it. And so now, again, the Associated Press, there was this line in it. It really struck me as incredibly comical. Here it is. They write, Biden's two most recent Democratic predecessors, Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, also cut budget deficits, only to leave office and see their Republican successors use the savings on tax cuts. You don't say. Oh my God. What? Why don't I get my shocked face? Oh no. I get my Pikachu face. Oh, really? They took that money and they spent it on tax cuts for the rich? No way. No way. I thought they were the party of fiscal responsibility. No, that's the game, by the way. That's the game. This is what they all do. Look, here's how it goes. Democrats do austerity, and then Republicans take the money saved from austerity and they give it to the rich in tax cuts. Look, the Bush and Trump tax cuts together transferred trillions of dollars to the top, to the very top. That's not an accident. That's not by accident. No, both parties, when it comes to it, to serving corporations, are in on it. And it's because they have the same donors. You look at Democrats and Republicans on economic issues. We're not talking about social issues where Republicans are monstrous. No, we're looking at economic issues, and you don't find a lot of difference. Both serve the corporations. Both tend to favor giveaways to companies, tax cuts. Yes, there are some policies that Democrats will pretend that they're in favor of that are popular, but they rarely enact them. And so there's not much difference in the reality. And by the way, one example here is Joe Manchin. You remember Joe Manchin? You remember the Build Back Better, right? Well, Joe Manchin destroyed it. He tanked it because they said, oh, it's the deficit. It's the deficit. No, Build Back Better would have increased spending and gave people things like childcare, child tax credits, which were popular, paid leave, cheaper prescription drugs, raising taxes on the rich to pay for it. All of that stuff is stuff that was popular with the American people. And you know what the donors said? They said, no, we can't have that. You know why? We'd lose money. We lose money. We were never meant for it to happen. And so what Joe Manchin is the same as the parliamentarian, the rotating villain. Kirsten Sinema, another rotating villain. They're there to tank these very popular policies, and then what the Democratic Party does is they say, "Oh, I guess our agenda, our popular agenda, just got crushed. I guess it's not that popular. We might want to do deficit reduction." In fact, let's go to CNBC. Recent article. Here's what they wrote. The president has recast his economic strategy in recent months to focus on deficit reduction and stricter spending controls as dozens of his fellow Democrats face close midterm elections that will decide the composition of Congress in the final 2 years of his first term. Comments about the more frugal budget plan come as the White House looks for ways to sympathize with and assist voters frustrated by skyrocketing inflation rates not seen since the 1980s. We really sympathize with you. Now we're going to do austerity. If I were more of a conspiratorial person, I would think, wouldn't this be a good time for something major to happen? I don't know, like the Supreme Court dropping a draft that would kill reproductive rights in this country? Because it turns out, deficit reduction, it's not a winner with the American people. Not a great campaign issue for Democrats. And look, and by the way, losing reproductive rights is a huge thing. And one of the biggest civil rights issues I think we've seen, if not the biggest of today. Well, that'll get people out to vote, right? That's the Democratic plan. Vote harder, vote harder. We're not actually going to do anything about it. We're not going to codify Roe v. Wade because we could have. But we're not. But please go out and vote harder. Just vote harder. I don't know if that's the case. I'm speculating out loud. But the fact of the matter is, regardless of the motivation and the political beliefs of the leakers, or the leaker, this revelation has changed the entire conversation and political landscape. Now you have Democrats that are suddenly getting tons and tons of donations. They're getting a message they can rally around, save and protect reproductive rights. And I think that is incredibly important, by the way. And also, look, Democrats ought to be thankful for this one. Congressional Democrats, I say. Because now they don't have to talk about kitchen table issues. They don't have to mention student loan debt. Because guess what? Republicans are literally taking away civil rights, the right for a woman to choose. The irony, of course, that's going to be lost among so many people is that Republicans were only able to get back into power and change the Supreme Court for an entire generation because of the Democrats' weak fecklessness and how they were only interested when they had the chance to do real change, real structural change that will benefit millions of Americans. They decided to do austerity instead, and now they're doing it again. And they're only doing it, and by the way, they're doing it for the money, obviously, and they're also trying to appease Republican voters who hate them. Instead of focusing on improving everyone's material conditions by trying to pass a populist economic agenda and actually fighting for it. There's a difference between saying you're for these things and actually doing things to try to fight for them. And we haven't seen them try to really fight for them. And you know what? I'll also include progressives in that, in the squad, who have not been fighting enough. Now, I love when Cori Bush went out there and actually protested on the steps of the Capitol. That was trying to fight, but we haven't seen anything since. What have we seen from the rest of the squad other than tweets? Other than interviews? They abandoned Nina Turner. They abandoned other progressives. They didn't do endorsements. They didn't get out there and campaign. Bernie Sanders, still one of the very few people who actually have. So, if you're not going to fight, then what are you there for? What are you there for? And now, getting back to, of course, the establishment. Look, establishment Democrats are still using big corporate money to crush progressive challengers in these primaries who would advocate for bold issues and intimidating other progressive members of Congress into turning against their own. That's the reality of the current political climate coming into the midterms. And I tell you, folks, it is bleak.